Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined today by CJ Vogel and Gerry Hamilton of On Texas Football. This episode of State of the Program brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. Each and every week, CJ and Gerry and I get together. We talk about what we call the state of the program. We take a kind of 30,000-foot view of Texas and where they're at and what's going on behind the scenes. This week, I think we're going to take a little bit of a different tack. We're going to talk about what we're thinking heading into spring ball. Next Tuesday is the start of spring ball for the Longhorns. It's kind of a point that we've been pointing towards, or a time that we've been pointing towards the last couple of months here. And so what we thought we would do today is kind of talk about the strengths and weaknesses, or more likely the optimism and reason we have some optimism and the reasons we have some concerns. What do we have concerns about heading into this? I thought that might be interesting to go about and do. Gerry, I'm going to start with you. I want to point it to you this way. If you're excited about Texas football, what is the singular most important thing or most exciting thing for you as you look toward Texas football right now?
I think I'll go on record, and people will have it on video. I think Texas has the best quarterback room in the country. And I know Arch doesn't have a lot of experience, but I trust what I saw in high school. I trust what I hear where he's at. And Quinn coming back as a third-year starter that was a quarterback of a playoff team. There's only two of those guys that'll be back in college football, Quinn Ewers and Jalen Milroe. And one's got a new coaching staff, a great coaching staff in Kalen DeBoer and his group, but still a new coaching staff. But Quinn Ewers is the only quarterback also returning that was in the playoffs that's a third-year starting quarterback. Jalen Milroe will be second. And I think Arch Manning is going to get a lot of reps this spring. Obviously, as the number 2 guy, where last year Malik Murphy had more snaps. You're now entering Arch Manning in year 2 of college football. I think you're going to see him a lot in the spring. I think you're going to see him a little bit in the season as Sark gets him ready to play. But I think Texas has 2 quarterbacks that can go out. If Quinn Ewers went down week 4, I have more confidence in Arch Manning in year 2 than I did Texas last year in going on and having a 10-win season. I didn't have confidence last year that would happen. I have confidence this year that would happen. I think Texas has the best quarterback room in the country. I know some of those rankings have come out, and Texas and Ohio State and Oregon are kind of the top 3, and I get them. Especially Oregon with Dante Moore transferring in and Dylan Gabriel transferring in and Austin Novosad from Dripping Springs. I get it. They're 1 through 3, really good. I think that Texas has the best quarterback room in the country because of their 1 and 2. And that gives me a great optimism for the season and this spring because of how much work that 1 and 2, especially the number 2, is going to get this spring. Then the other reason for optimism, experienced offensive line. I mean, you're all 5 starters, counting Cam Williams, who's now entering his 3rd year in the program, 2nd spring practice, by the way, which will be big for him. But he started 1 game against Kansas State. So literally the entire starting offensive line has started a Power 5 football game. 4 starters back from a playoff team. DJ Campbell headed into year 2 is going to make a huge jump. Everybody knows it's coming. If you don't think it's coming, go back and look at guys from year 1 to year 2 that are as talented as he is that had to learn a new position. But he has a lot of things you can't teach. And now Kyle Flood's teaching him the rest. But Kelvin Banks in his contract year 3, in preseason All-American. Then you have guys like Cole Hudson, who has started all 13 games as a freshman, weren't healthy last year. And that enabled DJ Campbell, that accelerated his growth on the field. So that's actually a blessing in disguise, not for Cole, but for the Texas team in a way. But then you got guys like Neto in year 3, right? Your depth at the center position, never in my years covering Texas has it been like this. Connor Robertson came in and played very well against Oklahoma in a difficult adversity type of situation. He proved he can play at this level. Cole Hudson was ahead of him as a 2nd-team center at times. Then you have Daniel Cruz coming in. You literally have more depth at the center position, which is the most underrated position on the offensive line that Texas has had in a long time. So those are the 2 things that really stick out to me. If I have a 3rd-year starting quarterback and a quarterback behind them that is extremely talented, and I have an experienced offensive line in front of those guys, that makes for giving Texas a chance to have a tremendous spring and season, especially transitioning to a much bigger, better athlete conference in the SEC.
CJ, I'm going to ask you yours next. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. The State of the Program always brought to you by Adam Lowy, Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, motorcycle accident, etc., and want some free advice, no strings attached, just advice, give them a call or reach out to them at loweylawfirm.com. Again, free advice, no strings attached, loweylawfirm.com. That's Adam Lowy. You've been injured in a car wreck or motorcycle accident. CJ, your reasons for optimism. Now, I'm going to give you two choices as well. Gerry going obviously with quarterback room first and then OL experience. What do you think the reasons for optimism are right now?
Yeah, building off of the depth side of things that Gerry hit on with the offensive line, I'd look at the wide receiver room and really the playmaking room in general as a big reason for optimism for Texas. No longer are you reliant on just one playmaker at each position to go out and make those, game-changing situational plays that we've seen in years past at wide receiver specifically, where Texas was kind of a two-headed monster last year after being a one-headed guy the years previously. Now you have a number of big-time playmakers with experience coming in. Silas Bolden will be joining the team in the summer, but right now, Isaiah Bond coming in from Alabama, Matthew Golding coming in from Houston, joining Jonte Cook in this room as kind of the older person in that room right now is kind of interesting to think about, considering he only has 8 career catches at Texas. But those 3 guys added in with DeAndre Moore, who will be in his second year in the system, plus a 5-star freshman of Ryan Wingo, that's 6 really solid wide receivers that you can rely on rather than having just 2 plus a Jordan Whittington that we saw last year to kind of clean up underneath. I think Texas is going to be able to throw a number of different looks, variations and formations out there that will really throw and put defenses in binds when it comes to formations and pre-snap tendencies. But beyond that, you have a really, really loaded and talented running back room with 6 guys that, at some point, I think this spring you can rely on to get the ball, move the chains, and hold on to the football itself. I think that's really important for the Longhorns. No longer are you asking a backup quarterback to move positions and be that bell cow running back at times. So that's encouraging to me. And of course, tight end is a spot that you're continuing to see encouraging steps forward when you add Jordan Washington to a room with Amari Niblack, Gunnar Helm, Spencer Shannon, and who else is in that room. So it's encouraging for me on that side. And then moving to my second reason for optimism is the athleticism in the secondary. You return Jahdae Barron, you add Andrew Makuba, Xavier Fills to me in that back room, in that safety room as well. And then you return 2 starting cornerbacks from a year as well. So I'm really encouraged from what we saw a year ago. What might have been the Achilles heel of that 23 Texas team. We saw, Washington obviously got the best of the Longhorns going deep vertically down the field. You're adding all those pieces while returning a guy with 3 interceptions in Michael Taff and arguably your best cover safety with Derek Williams. It should be, I would say, a significant step forward in that department when it comes to coveraging in space, especially against faster, deeper, more athletic wide receivers in the SEC.
Gerry, let me get your take on this because I agree with CJ. Playmaking as a category, right? Although, if you think about it, CJ, Jonathan Brooks was a playmaker at running back last year. Xavier Worthy certainly was or has been during his entire career at Texas. And I mentioned, I don't know if it's going to be better, but it was a strength of the team last year. And I think it's going to be a strength of the team again this year. So I agree with that. Gerry, what do you think about that conversation?
Yeah, so here's what I think. Playmaking to me for Sarkisian sometimes is more than just the catches and yards. I think part of the playmaking on this team that makes it so intriguing on offense is this is going to be faster offense than last year. So you could have Silas Bolden, Isaiah Bond, and Niblack racing down the field. And if that opens up somebody else for Sark in this scheme, that's playmaking. Because there are more guys this year, even though it's crazy to say after Worthy and A.D. Mitchell's 40 times, which you do train for, right, with those guys. I don't think anybody watched A.D. Mitchell and said, oh, he runs a 4.35 on Saturdays on a football field. That never really was presented that way. But I think Texas has so much more speed, quickness on this team that some of that playmaking is hey, you're going to run this corner out of the play, and I'm going to bring in my other receiver or my tight end right behind you in that space. So there's multiple ways to make plays on this offense, and that's kind of the way I look at it. And then a Jaden Blue out of the backfield will be more of a playmaker this year than he was last year in year 3 college. Well, and Cedric Baxter will be in year 2, just the natural progression of these guys. So I think Quinn's going to be a better playmaker in year 3 as a starting quarterback. So I think when you put it all together, I think Texas has more playmaking this year than they did last year. But I think a big reason is pure speed. Faster at tight end, and JT Sanders ran 4.69. Niblack's a 4.5 guy, right? Bond, Bolden, Golden, Ryan Wingo ran 10.5, 10.6 coming out of high school. John Tay Cook, 10.8. I mean, you have more of those guys this year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And here's the other piece. You mentioned those vertical threats. Then you sneak a guy like Jaden Blue underneath.
Yeah.
Right. And that the guys have their heads turned backwards, and all of a sudden they're he's just going streaking down the field. Mine are similar to y'all's, except for one position. First of all, I do agree with you, Jerry. One of my reasons for optimism, I said this from the start, quarterback. Whether it's the best in the country or not, I don't know. It's close. It's in the same conversation, right? You can't say, I can't say unequivocally it's number one. I can say it's definitely in the conversation. Period. End of story. Quinn Ewers, to your point, probably other than Dylan Gabriel, probably the most prepared quarterback in the country. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's had 5 years starting now, so that's my point to that. In 3 or 4 different offensive schemes, by the way. But so that is definitely one for me, because even if Quinn gets hurt, I think they have a capable backup.
Yeah.
Even if Arch goes down, I think they have a guy that can toss the ball around the yard, and Trey Owens. I mean, they can all make all the throws. Yeah. Now, their level of ability and scheme fit and understanding at this point are at different stages. We know that. So Quinn's definitely the guy. My point being, you're not going, oh my God, we got to go to number 2. And then if you're like, okay, this is how we're going to play the game with number 2. Last year, I love Malik. Don't get me wrong. He had strengths, and Sark played to those, and Malik played well at times. When that happened, you're like, oh my goodness, we just need to get through this BYU game. We need to get to the end of this Kansas State game, right? And so I don't know that Texas will be similarly situated if Quinn goes out. I also think that Quinn will be better this year because I think he's going to be more physically ready. I mean, we all talk about how he cut the mullet last year. Well, that wasn't really what happened behind the scenes. The mullet was just one example. What really happened is he started taking care of his body better. Now we're getting another year of that. And as we all know, that those things add on. You don't just go from, 185 pounds, 190 pounds to 220 full of muscle in a week. It takes years of true development. And so there's that. But the one place that I think is going to be a real positive this year, based on what I'm hearing behind the scenes that we aren't talking enough about, is edge. I know everybody thought about Colin Simmons coming in and his potential of having an immediate impact, or even Zeno Umeozulu. But I'm telling you, the word behind the scenes on Trey Moore, the transfer from UTSA, has been nothing short of astounding. I mean, they are talking about him like he's an all-American caliber guy that walked in. Now, my question, and this is a plays into it a little bit, is that because we haven't seen a great edge at Texas in a long time, or is Trey Moore really that good? I don't know the answer. I mean, that's going to be one, but I do think that the edge position, when you have Ethan Burke coming back, you have Barron Sorrell coming back, Justice Finkley getting coming back as well. Then you may have a guy like Darian Gillette that plays out there some. You have other guys that can get
Jamon Tapp in year 3.
Jamon Tapp has been another guy that said to be coming on a little bit. I think that while last year the interior of the defensive line was the strength, I think you're seeing it become the exterior, the edge position. So I wanted to mention those two.
Yeah, I think that's great, Bobby. And look, last year, and this is why the edge is so big for me as far as reasons for optimism, if I'd have had a third one, is The move to the SEC, you're going to face more athletic, longer arm, more NFL prospects at offensive tackle.
Yep.
And you faced it in the Washington game last year, and you couldn't get enough pressure, especially when they start moving the pocket. You could not disrupt their timing with edge pass rush in that game. Your strength was your interior, and Kalen DeBoer is too good a coach to let those guys dictate a game. Now, do you have guys that can actually dictate the game with their pass rush? Perhaps. That's why I said, can you? Do you have those guys? If it's proven out that Texas does have those guys in the SEC, then they're going to have a very, very good, if not special season.
Yeah,
CJ,
one last note on Trey Moore, Bobby, is if you're questioning what kind of talent he is, go back to his recruitment out of the portal and say who else was interested in getting him to their program. It was a Nick Saban, Alabama, before he retired. It was Ohio State trying to get him on campus before he made a decision. Those teams pretty good at identifying entrenched talent, especially on the edges. I would say Texas really found a good one here with Trey Moore. And like you guys, I'm really excited to see what kind of impact he brings immediately to this Texas team, especially on the edge.
CJ, I'm going to stick with you here. What we want to talk about things to be concerned about to keep it even-handed. Your strengths were playmaking, which I think I agree with. Improved secondary talent overall. What are your concerns for this team heading into spring ball next Tuesday?
Yeah, similar to what I had on the optimistic side of playmaking, I'm going to stay there, but it's going to be that lack of familiarity. And is there a little bit of a slow start with Quinn Ewers getting up to speed with these guys? We know that he liked Xavier Worthy a ton. We know that he also had a ton of experience throwing the ball to Jordan Whittington. And we saw that time and time again last year on third and
JT Sanders too.
Absolutely. But in those 3rd, 7, 3rd and 8 kind of ranges, who was that guy that was running over the middle and kind of cutting back, finding that groove of the zone and being open? It was Jordan Whittington. And when he needed a big play, it was to Xavier Worthy. And later in the year, we eventually saw A.D. Mitchell become that guy as well. But it takes time, especially when you've only thrown 8 career passes to anybody in this room right now. There's, again, a ton of talent, a ton of speed, and a ton of acceleration. But how quickly can you get these guys up to speed with Quinn Ewers? This spring is going to be very, very big for me to make sure that, hey, this isn't going to be a big weakness. This should be a strength, and the spring should kind of pole vault all these guys into that category of moving into the SEC. Yeah, we can rely on a transfer Silas Bolden. We can rely on a transfer Isaiah Bond rather than a true freshman or someone who, again, doesn't have that kind of camaraderie right now with Quinn Ewers, because, again, only 8 career receptions from Quinn Ewers to any of these guys from a year ago. That's the entire roster. So that's area one. But again, I think it'll just be a matter of repetition, getting in and out of spring football, throwing sessions in the summer. It should be fine by the time fall camp comes around. But right now, going into spring, that's one of the things on the top of my list. The other one is the linebacker position. And I know we're looking at Anthony Hill as a guy who could take that all SEC jump eventually in his career. Next year, I think we're all expecting him to be kind of that big focal point in the middle of the defense, similarly to how we saw Jalen Ford over the last 2 seasons. But who's next to him? I think we can right now kind of pencil in David Benda as going to be that guy alongside him entering year 5 as a Texas Longhorn. But we've talked about his shortcomings in the passing game. Texas added Kendrick Blackshear at 263 pounds. I'm not necessarily sure you're going to be seeing him as a 3-down guy as well. We kind of know what role he is expected to, kind of undertake as he comes into the Texas linebacking room as well. And then that moves into Leonga Lafau, who didn't see extended snaps in 2023, but we know that the staff gave him a pretty sizable opportunity in special teams with his extended snaps. And I feel like they give him the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But who's going to be that guy with Anthony Hill to kind of bridge that gap from the pass to the run game in the middle of the field? That is going to be the most important part for me, because you're taking a step back in the run defense. If you're biting too early on play action, well, that just puts even more of a strain on a secondary that needs to improve from a year ago, although should be with the incoming athleticism and talent. So linebacker for me.
Yeah, you got that. You got Mo Blackwell coming back, who's gained a little bit of weight. We'll see if that plays a role, and we'll get an opportunity to see him this spring to see if that actually has taken, to your point, CJ. I will say that when I think about playmaking, it's not just the wide receivers, to your point, although you were focused on the wide receivers there. The running backs, he did complete a lot of passes to both Blue and Baxter a year ago, as well as to Gunnar Helm. So
Right.
you're really specifically about his timing slash rapport, for lack of a better word, with those receivers. And I think that's
Absolutely.
a fair assessment. Jerry, what about your reasons for concern or thoughts for concern?
Well, I have one position, then I kind of have an overview offensively. My reason, I had two for optimism, two for concern is corner depth and how much are the corners going to develop. I think Manny Muhammad's solid starter. I think Terrence Burke's solid starters. Guys that will have a career in football long term, where they get drafted and stuff. That's all combine, how fast you run, blah, blah, blah. Right. And do you stick at corner or you nickel? Right. Then you have Gavin Holmes coming back. Fast guy, needs to get more physical. Right. How does year 2 at Texas look for him versus year 1? But then, the rest of this corner depth. I mean, is Jahdae Barron he's taking reps at corner? Is he going to take real reps at corner in the spring? Is he an emergency corner for Texas, or is that a real possibility? They have to build out depth at that position. I think some of the young guys, like Kobe Black, needs time. He was a 3-sport small town guy. He needs time, right? So some of these young corners, Santana Wilson, not on campus early, one of the few guys not here early. Those guys might need a little time in this class. So what does a Warner Oberson look like? Who's going to come on at the cornerback position to solidify depth after spring football? Is going to be big because you're always going to have injuries. You're going to have guys miss time. So especially in a more physically grueling conference at the SEC. So what does that depth look like, and how much better are your frontline starters this year, next year, as opposed to this year? And then my second one football, a lot of guys with expectations. Look, Isaiah Bond caught 48 passes last year. Matthew Golden was U of H's number 1 or 2 playmaker. Silas Bolden, he had 750 yards receiving, right? Jonte Cook has expectations in year 2. Ryan Wingo's a 5-star with expectations. DeAndre Moore is patiently waiting after a first year where he didn't play much at all. Now, Ryan Niblett coming off a redshirt year. Nye Black coming in. Running backs, Cedric Baxter, a sophomore. Jaden Blue now definitely has different expectations than he did going in the last season when he almost transferred before the season. Then you have other running backs, freshman guys coming in. One football, a lot of expectations amongst these guys. And to me, the big key offensively is you have to sacrifice a little bit of you to raise trophies again at the end of the season. And if all the guys are willing to do that, then it's a great year to be Steve Sarkisian, because they didn't climb the mountaintop last year, but they got pretty far. So if all these guys will give up a little bit of you for the betterment of the team, knowing that winning games, seeing that the NFL draft is still going to happen, your opportunities in pro football are still going to happen. If you can put those away a little bit and sacrifice 5, 6, 7 catches and 100 yards for the betterment of the team, great things are going to happen.
I got to say, when you mentioned about the imagery I felt in my brain when you talked about raising the trophy, gave me a little tingle down my spine. It made me feel good. I would agree with you on those. I think that the one football problem is something that Sark, though, is familiar.
Yes.
I mean, he's done that not just at Texas last year, but at Alabama.
Alabama.
He gets those guys in positions to make big plays.
Yeah.
And that somehow satiates. He gets them to make the highlight plays, right? Keelan Robinson's a perfect example. Very few touches, but you can think back to a couple of plays where he's etched in your memory, like the run against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship. So Sark has some experience taking that. Yep. Mine are a little bit more straightforward. I agree with CJ about linebacker. I don't know why, and it's not just because David Benda may not be a pass guy. It's more just how much they lost with the experience of Jalen Ford. Like, who is going to be the guy that marries the front of the defense to the back of the defense?
Who's wearing the headset, Bob?
Yeah, exactly. And so who is that guy? It's not, and believe me, I'm as high as anybody on Anthony Hill's long-term ability. Is he that guy? Or is that going to have to be somebody else that wears the headset, et cetera, right? So I don't know the answer. That's the matter of fact about it. So that's a little bit of a concern. I want to see what happens this spring during practice. But the other one for me is just obvious, and I've been saying it and preaching it, and people are going to be likely mad that I'm even mentioning it, but it's depth at defensive tackle. Until or unless they add somebody on the defensive line beyond just Teoala Savea from Arizona, I just think that they're too weak in the up front, in the defensive front right now to really go in there. Vernon Broughton can gain another 20 pounds. He's just not going to be a guy that ever anchors really well against the run. And neither is Alfred Collins. They're both natural 3 techniques. Neither of them are noses. And the nose guards on this team that are true noses, for example, Sadir Mitchell and Alex January, they're very young. And then maybe your most talented of all of those guys is Gerry Bledsoe, but Gerry is the natural 3 or 5 technique.
100%.
He's not a 0. And so that 0 technique is my, what are they going to do? And I'll say this, if the Texas offense line and Jake Majors can't root those guys out in practice, that doesn't speak well for the offensive line for Texas, although I think they'll be able to.
By the way, to your point, Bobby, it's real easy for prognosticators sitting here and say, well, Texas is just going to be more aggressive with their defensive front this year. That sounds great until Georgia lines up across from you. And you know what Michigan's going to do in the big house because they're going to have inexperience at quarterback unless they rip somebody in the portal. So, but even if they do, how often did J.J. McCarthy throw the football last year? You know what Michigan's going to look at with Texas and try to do in that game. And you know what Georgia's going to do. So for the people saying, oh, Texas is going to be more aggressive in the front and they'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. It works that way against lesser opponents. But in between the trenches in the game, you must win. That doesn't always work. You do have to be strong enough to hold up against the run. Else, Carson Beck will be a Heisman finalist that only throws 21 passes against you, not 35.
Yeah. All right. I want to say thanks one last time to Adam Lowy. He's our sponsor. Adam is with the LowyLawFirm.com. If you've been injured in a car wreck, motorcycle wreck, ATV, and think you might be due compensation, give him a shout. Reach out to him at LowyLawFirm.com. Adam, thank you very much for your ongoing sponsorship of On Texas Football. Guys, y'all have anything else you're really wanting to see or hear from or think about as we head into I guess it's 6 days now until spring practice starts?
Yeah, we touched about it just a little bit ago, but as we move into the spring football season, it really should be the reports coming out that the running backs are running free and wild. I think with this returning offensive line going against what is considered to be kind of a question mark on the interior, you should be hearing about C.J. Baxter, Jaden Blue, and the youngsters really having a good showing early on in spring camp. I'll be really encouraged by that. And again, I just want to see how 7-on-7 is going. Manny Muhammad, Terrence Brooks, Makuba, Jade Barron, Derek Williams versus this new wide receiving room. That's a lot of talent. We talk about it all the time. Iron sharpens iron. This is a lot of talent in that 7-on-7 room for the Texas Longhorns. I think that is going to be a fun battle for both sides.
I have a question for y'all that we haven't really touched on enough. What does the loss of Jaron Thompson do? I mean, he was off maligned by Texas fans, right? Step slow, yada, yada. But you know what? He played a hell of a lot of snaps.
He did.
At Texas. What is the loss? I mean, is he replaced? Obviously, he's replaceable because everybody's replaceable. But my point being, does Texas lose something there? He opted to transfer after graduating, et cetera. What are the thoughts?
I actually don't, because look, I mean, it's not nothing against Jaron. I thought when he could get to the play, he made a play, right? But I think Makuba is, I mean, if you just take player for player in that instance, I mean, Texas upgraded significantly at that position. Then you add in, the continued experience, Derek Williams in year 2, even the continued experience of Michael Taft. He's going to be a more confident player this year than he was last year headed into the season, and as he should be. And then you have the young guys like Phil Samee. Then you have, look, what can you do with Jade Barron? What are you going to do with Jalen Gilbo? Does this open up an opportunity for Gilbo that arguably could have been opened up last year? or Austin Jordan. I think those are so. I think there's better athletes and more, and Makuba just a better player that have come in at that position. So I think Texas. I think safety is going to be the most improved position on the team next year. And probably part of that's because it was a weakness last year. And your most talented guy was a freshman who didn't have spring practice. But I think it's going to be significantly upgraded. Now, the question is, are you challenged more in the SEC? So does it look significantly upgraded?
Yeah, Bobby, if I can add to that, just replacing, quote unquote, with Andrew Makuba there, you're losing a lot of snaps, you're gaining a lot of snaps, you're gaining a lot of experience as well with Andrew Makuba. And where Jaron Thompson was really good was in communication and as a leadership in the back of that Texas secondary. What you're getting with Jahdae Barron joining this group is familiarity and comfortability with Michael Taft and Jahdae Barron, who he's trained with for the last several years in the Austin area. So it's not completely foreign to him to get acclimated with this Texas secondary like you would with, a typical transfer from a random school outside of the conference.
I want to add another name, Bobby, Jelani McDonald. When guys have opportunities that are great athletes entering year 2 of a program and get their feet wet in Power 5 football after being a small school quarterback jack of all trades, that guy might take off this year because he's going to get a lot of opportunities this spring to let that supreme athleticism and length shine through.
I'm going to say this about Andrew Makuba. Some people question his physicality. Just something to put it out there. And I'm not saying that it's one of the reasons why I think he didn't go pro. He's not exactly the strongest guy. And Jaron, for lack of a better term, he at least tried to play big. Does that make sense to you? Even though he wasn't a big guy, we'll see what it means. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just putting it out there for people to think about. And it's one of those things that hopefully we get a chance to see for the first time here in a week.
Yeah,
right.
You said anything else to mention? I'll tell you my biggest thing in the spring is, look, recruiting rankings do matter because it means you're bringing in a lot of talent to the program. And this is the first time in a long time at Texas in a class that wasn't a bust, which Herman had one that was a bust, that the number 5 ranked 2022 class, number 3 ranked 23 class, those guys are actually growing up at Texas, and they haven't lost many of them. That's what's going to be fun to watch. I mean, you can go through the names. I just said Jelani McDonald. Think of all the 23 class names that Texas fans want to see in the spring and want to see something from, want to hear about. Looking forward to seeing their first real action in a spring game that matters.
I've mentioned Darian Gillette.
Yeah.
Then you have Arch Manning and guys like that. But Darian Gillette's a big one for me because, I thought that he has a chance to be an NFL player.
High caliber SEC athlete, Bobby. High caliber SEC athlete.
All right, that's going to do it for State of the Program. Again, brought to you by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. Guys, I'll see you again next week. Obviously, we have a bunch of live streams, et cetera, going on, coffee and football as well. Please join us for that. We appreciate you. Gerry Hamilton, CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been State of the Program. Hook 'em, guys.